I don't have a meeting left. Rachel, that's good share.
Yeah, I guess. I think we. Thank you.
All right, we are recording. Everyone be on their best behavior. Good morning. Thanks for joining us for the Ad hoc Open Space Committee. This morning, we are going to begin reviewing and discussing the draft plan that was sent around last week. Before we jump into that, I just want to make sure or see if anyone has any questions or revisions on the notes from our September meeting that were also sent. All right. We've got some new people, so maybe we'll do go around the table and around the Zoom and do introductions. We'll start in person. So I'm Jamie Fitch, the Sustainability Manager here.
I'm Judy Colton George with Viewshed.
I'm Madeline Tripp with Viewshed. Hi, I'm Autumn Spear, I'm the Planning Director.
Hi, I'm Maggie Vishnu, and I'm representing the Conservation Commission.
Doug Williams representing the Parks and Conservation Board.
I'm Helen Harmon. I just started the Development Review Plan.
Karen Martin, Scarborough Economic Development Corporation.
Todd Souza, Community Services.
Chrissy Mowers, Global Interest.
Nicole Hall, Community Services.
And Noah, we'll start with you on Zoom.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Noah Nagrin, Chair of the Shellfish Conservation Commission.
You and Tyler.
Hi everyone, Tyler Davis. I'm the liaison from the Coastal Waters and Harbors Advisory Council.
Thanks for being here. And Karen, if you're able to.
Yep, I'm here. Good morning. I'm Karen Shoup. I am the Town Council Liaison to this committee.
Thank you. All right. I will attempt to share my screen so we can go through the plan. Let's see. So Judy, I will hand it over to you.
Sure. So I think my first question for everybody is, has everybody been able to get access to this? And do you, have you been able to comment or at least know how to comment, should you desire to do so?
Yes, access.
Yep,
Haven't commented yet.
okay. And I just wanted to know if anybody wanted us to go through how to do that, or if you're all good with it. All good? Any questions? Okay. Step one done. So there are things that we know need to be fixed in this, but we really wanted to get it out and get it to you all so that you can give us some sense of direction. So I guess the next thing I would say is, are there any, overall large scale comments that anybody has?
Just, it's beautiful. I mean, it is just nicely laid out. It's easy to understand. And I just think that's a top goal for us. And I love the way it was laid out.
Any other thoughts about overall organization or, okay. Then I think probably the next thing to do is just start going down through it and see what sorts of things.
Could I ask? a quick,
Yep, sure.
Getting other people to look at it. There's a link in the email that you sent that links to an Acrobat. I mean, is that forwardable?
Yes, well, but we probably try to go.
So I would say at this point, the link's available. It's in the agenda packet that's posted on the website, so anybody can go to that and click on it. But I would try to limit this for the committee's use currently, because there will be kind of an overall public process for getting public feedback and input on the plan. So.
Well, for me, the Parks and Conservation Land Board, I really want them to give their input to this. We've got people on the committee who are really tied into a lot of different things, planning board experience, etc. So I'd like that committee to be able to look at.
Sure. Yeah, and I guess we can have that discussion as a committee here. I just want to make sure that it's not going to get too overwhelming, and we also want to talk about the timeline for when this goes out to public comment also. So I don't know if we want to discuss that, and if we want to address
Sure.
that now.
That's fine.
And then after, I have one question about organization.
Okay. So our plan is for, to get sort of detailed comments from the committee. And make those adjustments. And then we will put it on the website also as a PDF, because again, it will be large for people to download so that they'll be able to look at it right from that link. But we will turn comments off on that version. And what we'll do is we'll have a comment card on the website for people, because we don't want to make it a 300 person editing event. But we want people to be able to tell us what they think, and if there's things that need to be changed. So we'll have a comment card, that will allow people to say like what page number. If they have a comment about a specific page, they'll be able to type in a page number and then tell us a comment about it. Or, the overall plan, if they have comments about that. And so then we'll collect all that information up. We'll bring that back to you guys so that you can all see it, and we'll decide which things to make changes. So that's the overall plan. So I think for the committee, the question would be, how much longer do you think you all need to edit before we'll need like a week or two after you're done to make changes and check them with staff and all that kind of thing. So
I probably need till the end of the week. Is that fair?
Mhm.
Is that reasonable?
oh yeah,
And is that reasonable for committee members? Are you gonna have time between now and Friday?
I'm not sure, I should, at the end of this week, I don't know.
What was-
Get it out.
you can have more time than
What's
that.
the timing? Have we decided what day we want to bring it forward for the public meeting? Are we shooting for January?
We're shooting for February.
February? So what about if we have until December 6th to give you all, because Thanksgiving week's pretty useless, right? It is for me.
Yeah,
And so
No, I agree.
like maybe December 6th, that's a Friday. And then that way, you guys could wrap up the draft before Christmas holidays. And then we could put it online. Does that sound okay?
And would that include comments from the land board and the committee and anybody else internally on the other?
That's fine.
Does that work? And then you all could distribute it amongst your smaller group and then incorporate comments back.
So I should be communicating to people that they should go to the website and look at the.
you can send them the link that did go out. I just want to make sure that that's not going out to like a broad public audience. If it's just kind of your representative committee, I think that that's fine at this point. And then we will do a bigger push to the broader community once it's ready for
And we
that.
can make that clear in the email.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't-
Yeah, and it's helpful if people write in when they do comment, their name.
Yeah. I tried to do that.
Yeah.
Yes, I saw that, it's really helpful, so that people, so that we know where that comment came from.
I'll ask, I can put together an email, with the link and with some kind of recommended guidelines to follow, which will include their name and the committee that they're representing, so we kind of know where the comment's coming
Yeah,
from.
so we don't get any we don't want it on Facebook and getting random things. I'm just gonna say. Not yet, anyway.
They'll be,
Till December 20th, and then we can put it out for
Yeah.
public consumption.
Yeah.
Can we just go to the visions and goals section quick, page 5, if we could?
Could I,
The reason why I'm asking is when you put out the thing, Jamie, as far as what people are looking for, they don't know what our goals were, what they're reviewing. Are they reviewing just for how it reads or content? You know what I mean?
we'll
So-
put a note up on the website where they're going to that comment card to give them that information, like we'll say, this is, we'll give them like a little background of the project and, this is the final report. What
Just
we're
want
hoping-
everybody that's seeing that review are getting the same
Yeah.
information to review it the same way versus
Yeah.
just all over the place.
Yeah, and we'll work with Jamie and Autumn, and we can work with you too about how to word that so that everybody's in agreement with what that says.
Right, so I just can double check our timeline. So this committee, and our representative committees will have until December 6th to go through the draft that we're looking at this morning. And we will hope to get the public draft out December 20th. That was the goal. How long do we want to have that out? I mean, that's gonna be right over Christmas and New Year's also, so I think that that's gonna be a dead space, so we might need to account
Keep
for
it out
that.
to the middle of January.
Yeah.
anyways.
And will that give you all enough time to kind of incorporate so that we're ready for February something?
Yes, I think so,
Workshop.
because, you know, well, one, hopefully there won't be that many comments.
Yeah.
Just because we'll have gotten it to, yeah, we've gotten it to a good place,
Right.
and so that will be helpful, but that will give us plenty of time. I think what we'll need to do is just set up a meeting and go through the comments and decide
Okay.
if there's anything that needs to be addressed in those comments.
That sounds good.
So like January 17th, and then we have until the 31st. Are you shooting for February 19th, Jamie, or February 5th? Probably. February
I would
5th.
prefer to go later.
That's good, that's good. And that'll probably be easier for the council to kind of get rolling a little
Yeah.
bit, because I think we have the workshops filled up until probably then.
So your question. My question.
I tried to read this, as from the point of view of somebody who didn't know a thing about it, and might be a little skeptical. So, I kept looking, I mean, I thought it was beautiful also, and I very well laid out, but I kept reading and as I went through it, how did they know that? Well, how'd they come to that?
Mhm.
Well, how'd they come to that?
Okay.
And at the very end, you have the planning process. And I don't think you want to start out, so obviously you made a decision about why to put that at the end. But I just wonder if in the introduction or somewhere early on, you can say, in one or two sentences, this was
Yeah.
developed, this, was developed by a team of people who are blah, blah, blah. Yep, one or two sentences so that it's, all this stuff just doesn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
As far as, being grounded in the
Yeah.
town.
Sometimes when you've been doing it all along, you forget.
Yeah. Well, and I think also putting that disclaimer and then see such and such a
Right.
page for an overview of the
yeah,
process.
Yeah.
Or for more information.
Yeah,
on the
we'll just
process.
write a paragraph about the overall process and then say, for more details, see the appendix.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right, so I guess it's up to you guys how you wanna do this. Do you wanna just go down through everything and then we can talk about them? Or do you wanna point out particular places that you wanna look at in particular? Or we can just start at the introduction and roll our way through.
I think
Yeah.
go through it.
Yeah.
You wanna go through the whole thing? Well, that's fine, that's fine. I mean, part of this that matters is the strategies. I mean, the rest of it is how we got to the point where
Yeah.
the strategies to put together. So from my perspective of my committee, what matters is the strategies.
Yeah.
I think it's very important to point out that we're very consistent with our first open space plan, which I helped write. We had good consultants helping us with that, so, and it's worked out very, very well. And I think it's a testimony to that first plan, and it's also a testimony to this plan that the green and the purple are the same thing. I mean, it's virtually identical. It doesn't say, and you don't say in the plan that we can only purchase land that's in the purple. However, our ability over time to focus on the areas that we have identified again.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful that people in this town have identified that again. And that these priority areas are overlapping as well as they are. It's just wonderful. But the strategies become how this happens.
Yeah.
Right.
So obviously I'm a little biased towards those. but,
And
and the rest of it, it's good. The rest of the stuff is, we've been through and it's wonderful in the whole business of, identifying what the priorities are that whole process.
Yeah.
I do agree that the issue will be when you start getting comments, people who haven't been involved in the process have been ignoring the whole thing, which people are really good at. Now, all of a sudden, they're gonna look at it and say, well, why were these priorities? And, we didn't spend a lot of time on that, we really didn't spend time on getting strategies put into formats that work for us. For example, I am going to recommend to the Parks and Conservation Land Board that we're in the middle of doing work that has to be done now, particularly in terms of transitioning to new committee members, transitioning for new council members, information for them. How do we evaluate properties? And as a result, building in the priority areas into that evaluation process, I need to start that now.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna wait, and I'm not really worried about all these priority areas changing dramatically. But if they do, that's fine, but we're gonna build it into the process. We're gonna start that now.
Yeah.
That, I can't wait till February.
Well, oh, go ahead.
Just one other thing, so I agree that strategies are the most
I
important,
don't
but,
mind going to.
the implementation plan is too, I think, and I'd really like to dive into that.
Okay. And I just want to share, like, I went through Cressy's comments this morning and I found them really pertinent and helpful. And I liked some of the suggestions that you had for some of the maps. So I don't know if we just want to quickly go through some of those and then get to the strategies and implementation plan.
Yep.
So I don't know where that one.
That one is sort of, we had two categories of the conserved and like recreational.
Oh, yeah.
On page 7?
Yeah,
Yes.
And I think if you click on the comment itself,
it brings it to it.
yeah, or even in the comments
If you
panel.
click
Oh,
again,
brilliant.
it should drive you
Super.
to it, yes.
Yeah, open space definition, protected lands versus recreation lands. I think those are the two categories I was. and-
Yeah, so this was a discussion that we had at the last meeting, so distinguishing between kind of the umbrella of open space and then underneath that, we've got both protected and recreation lands, so. I really liked this idea, having the additional map to show, where the town's undeveloped parcels that are not protected are.
That
Yeah.
low hanging fruit.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's just that it's 400 acres in relative to things like the 87 acres
Right.
of municipal conserved land. I mean, it's not a massive chunk, but it could help get us there potentially,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you want that map to only show the undeveloped, or do you want it to show all four of those categories that are not on?
I thought the most
existing
important
map?
was, well, maybe.
Because we can do them
the
in four
first
different
two,
colors.
We could do
yeah,
the first two, which is because we have those two categories of recreational and
Mhm.
protected lands. And, this municipal undeveloped could potentially be part of, maybe or not, I don't know what the character of that land is in terms of. If it's undeveloped, I mean,
yeah, I mean, I guess, the recreational and schools could almost both fall under recreation land, because there are
Right.
public amenities
Correct.
associated with the
correct,
schools.
correct.
I'm not sure about civics, since those are kind of like our public works and our
Right.
fire stations.
But the discussion around, I was just thinking, my pause and quiet was going to the recreation lands in my head, and the only recreation land really is Willie has a connection to Rachel Carson as well as Butts Land Trust property. And then in the school campus, there are two, and I don't know exact acreage, but it was an exercise Karen had asked me to do. At Blue Point School, there's a lot of, that's a large parcel
Mhm.
compared to the footprint of the school. But it's down in a low wet area, so there may be something you could designate there. As well as, behind the middle school. And again, a lot of these major projects hinge on picking a school site, but once they eliminate, I think they have behind the middle school.
Mhm.
We've held off projects because of wetland and vernal pools in the back, so there's probably 10 acres at least that could be identified in one of these categories.
Yeah.
That regard, not in just the undeveloped property, but dropped into something else.
Yeah.
So I think looking at those are probably the only two parcels that I could think of off the top of my head that would have.
Yeah.
10 to 20 acres that might be, shoveled over into one of these other categories as part of an existing recreation facility or school facility.
So maybe that the most helpful way for for that map to be, the way for that map to be useful would be to show the existing protected lands as one color.
Yep.
And these other open spaces maybe as, you know, 4 different colors, so you can tell the difference between them, but so that they're clearly not the existing open space, but you can see how they fit in. If they're on the same map, because if we just put them on their own map, then that'll be hard, it's still
Yeah.
hard for people
Yeah,
to figure out how they
Yeah, I think they
fit.
should be on the same map.
Yeah, okay. So we'll have one map that just shows the one that's there that shows the existing protected lands, and then we'll do another map, we'll add another one that adds in those other spaces.
It'll be like the map on page 10, and then you'll do another one.
Yeah, the other place
Yeah.
I could go is here on this page 10 map.
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll take this map, and then the next one will be other town-owned lands, right? And then we'll put all the conservation lands as one color on that map.
Okay.
And then the things that are multicolored will be those 4 categories of
Okay.
other town-owned lands.
Why is that? I mean, I think it's neat that you can do that. but-
Because those
Why?
represent some potential low hanging fruit that if we get permanently protected, will count towards our 30 by 30, or there might be other recreational opportunities that could be developed there
Correct.
potentially. So those are basically things that the town may be able to move on now with very little expense associated with it.
Should the civic lands be included in that map then, or do you think that that's?
I put them in there just.
Make them gray.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put them in there,
Because it actually speaks to connections.
exactly.
Yeah.
You never know, there might be
Connection
one of
points,
them that you could put a little trail
Yeah.
behind it.
Yeah.
Snow dump, like,
Yeah.
there could be
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
So-
because it's a destination.
Like, I know where Yarmouth Snow Dump is, people go birding all the time. Except for in the winter.
So let's see, this one was about clean water.
Yeah, I just thought there was really, there were some, you know, obviously some really, big hotspots, and I just wondered, you know, those to me, like. In terms of water quality, like, it's a no doubt to protect those, and I just don't know exactly. For me, obviously, I have a sense of where they might be, but
Yeah.
a geographical identification would help, particularly people who aren't not as familiar with the.
Yeah, so I'd already,
geography.
we'd already talked about redoing all of,
Yeah.
or all the maps, we're gonna make a set of, we're gonna do the main roads.
Okay,
And then label those,
okay.
so that
Good.
people, you know, will be able to place themselves
good.
as to where they
Yeah,
are in
that's-
town.
I
Yeah,
think that would do it.
yeah, and we'll just put that on every single map. We
And
just didn't
then,
have time to revise that before today.
and then I haven't had a chance to go through since I did my first review and revision. Is there a discussion on how this information is then translated into the map?
That, yeah, there is, it's above this. Let's see. I think it's right in there. But we can work on making, I mean, we did make some changes there. So explaining how the rankings occurred, how it gets created, and then how it gets normalized.
So I know like Autumn and I were discussing and the light bulb clicked on for me this morning when we were talking, you were saying, you know, Eastern Trail, when we get down to. I'll go to that map since I'm gonna reference it. Eastern Trail is ranked at like a 5, but it's not dark blue on here, but that's like the overlaps of multiple 5s, for example, that gives
Yeah,
it that
right,
dark
right.
shading.
Right.
Right.
So there might only be like Eastern Trail that's identified as like a 5 in there, so it's not necessarily lighting up as.
Yeah.
As like a high priority because there aren't multiple categories.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and we can,
It's added together, and then like that right there is just like 1 through, normalized to be 1 through 10. of,
Yeah,
like,
so
all
the
that
table
stuff.
doesn't like
Show that,
exactly
yeah.
Match.
translate. to
right,
the
and we
key on
tried
the
to
map.
do a better job of explaining the normalization, but so, I mean, I can keep trying to go back and do this again. But so basically the issue is that each category has a different number of layers. So the maximum points that anything can get in each category is different. And so for us to be able to add them all together, they have to be the same, or else you're already over.
You're skewing it.
Otherwise, the habitat would just take over because we have the most layers for habitat, right? And it already is like high, anyway.
Would it be helpful if like your low, medium and high had a point range so you could see that?
No, that would make it work.
Makes it
Yeah. Just because it would be different for each map, right? Until they're normalized. So, but that's why they get normalized. It's just so we can smush them all together in the end and add one to the other in an equal way. And then what we took, and then the next step that we did after that was we took all the input from everybody and weighted each of those layers. So, you know, if they're at a 1 to 10, but that layer got 42% of the votes, then it got that number times 42%.
I see.
And, you know, and then all the other ones got theirs times their percentage, so that
Depending on what
that
the public
raised
input
and
was.
lowered the impact of various categories.
Right, so like habitat was pretty high, so that got
Right.
a higher vote.
So
Right,
yes,
okay.
yes, but if we'd have let it be
Weighting.
just
Yeah.
all those layers plus the highest percentage, then everything else would have just been like 0. So that's
Still
how we
don't
did it.
understand why the Eastern Trail is not all high.
Because there's,
I'm
because
just being really dense and so.
No,
other people are
it's
gonna-
just because really what the matrix is doing is looking at coincident things happening in the same place. So parts of the Eastern Trail are high because
Right.
there's other
They
things
overlap
there.
with, like, that's. a
But
different-
other parts of the Eastern Trail don't have anything else. There's no other category that matches it, or that's underneath it, right? It doesn't have any other, you know, recreational activity going on in that
No,
space, other than the Eastern Trail.
Trail's a rail bed.
Yeah, it's not
They
like
put the rail
super,
bed in. We're trying to avoid a lot of these areas. We're trying to buy stuff in. So the fact that parts of the Eastern Trail are lower priority from the standpoint of the way we're looking at it today should not be seen as negative.
Yeah.
No, I think
It
it's,
wasn't the Eastern Trail.
It's just.
I think it's just
for
kind
the
of
common- For
counterintuitive.
like the common person, they're gonna go, oh, the Eastern Trail is ranked high.
right,
And then
And
the
then it's
high
not high on
color
the
is
map.
dark blue, and then on the map, most of the Eastern Trail is light blue, except for the part that crosses the marsh.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
yeah.
Right.
No,
I was just
get it.
trying to figure out how to explain
Yeah.
that to
Yeah.
someone,
Yeah, well, we'll keep working on
Okay.
finding ways to explain it.
because
Better.
everybody in town knows where the Eastern Trail is. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, that's our
Right.
huge research.
mean-
What do you mean it's not
Right,
high?
I mean, one option that we could do is we could show a little table. You know, maybe just pick one of the maps, and maybe this is the easiest one to do that on, and we could show like all the values. In the table for one part of the Eastern Trail and the other, and the other part, and it'll say like Eastern Trail got 5 points. You know, Land Trust Trail, it got 0 points because it's only one thing. You know, but in terms of connection, you know, an existing connection, it got points, and that's how it got higher, right? Like, and then the other part, you would see that it has 0, 0, 0, 0. All it has is the 5 for Eastern Trail. And then we could have its total value, its normalized value. I don't know. That's just a thought. Like, we could actually show the
Like
numbers.
zoom into like.
Just
one
pick a
area.
spot, yeah, and show the numbers.
You know, as, with this kind of a thing, we do this kind of thing now on a smaller scale, Parks and Conservation Land Board. And we've worked with consultants before on this kind of thing. And I think I understand exactly what you're saying. People are gonna say, what is this?
What is
$5? How do we get to these numbers? I think it's important that we have, and we've been going through this with our evaluation process
Yeah.
we have, which you're recommending we develop, what we have. But, and we'll modify it to, but the point is that every time we show that to the council or anybody else, everybody gets bogged down in.
Yeah.
In weights and
Yeah.
weight values. and
Trying to verify
relative
data
values.
that they don't
Yeah.
understand.
And, you
Just
know,
make it blue. Who
We
cares?
really don't want that. We
Yeah.
really don't want this. to
Just for the
become-
public.
I read through this thing and I have, you know, obviously a very strong conservation background, a lot of knowledge about this, so it was easy for me to follow. It really is extremely well done. Your weighting process clearly is showing a lot of similarity to other processes we've used in the past, which I would expect, you know? So I think the important thing is to find that way to achieve what Autumn's talking about, which is real, so that particularly the council and the people who have to explain to the public
Yeah.
can know enough to be able to say, yeah, you can trust us. That's what we're trying to,
Right.
we're not trying to show everybody the numbers, because honestly, you know, I do this, you show people numbers and they just go nuts.
Right,
Yeah.
and the numbers don't mean anything.
No.
They are actually,
Sometimes-
it's just them
sometimes
compared to
those
other
are
numbers.
right.
Right.
It's all
That's
relative.
what I was thinking, if you could just put out by low, a score of 20 to 25 points, medium, 30 to 35 points, then it might,
But the problem is that on each map, high, medium, and low are a different set of number of points, so it'll be different on every map, like low is not always 25.
right,
But I think you
I
could
don't know if
probably
there would
put
be
that
any-
kind of like in the
yeah, in the legend.
legend maybe, so
Make them
that.
quintiles.
That's what I was just thinking, maybe
Yeah.
if you just gave them
Yeah,
that might,
Yeah,
and it could be, if it's different, that's okay. If the
I don't think
points
that's a
of the-
problem to be different.
I just
but
think
each
that
map
might
is
be able to be
like-
like,
is
oh,
Yeah.
this color is, and then, because for me, when I first looked at it, it didn't connect back, and so I was just looking for some sort of connection.
yeah.
And my question on the data later was the blue trail. We don't own the whole blue trail, so how are we scoring the? Right, we just have parts of the designated total footprint we're trying to achieve.
Well, technically, the Blue Trail is owned by the public, it's.
It's the river.
Water of the
Yeah,
state.
water is
Okay.
state, I think.
So we'll put numbers in.
Like, this one makes so much more sense, marsh migration, it's just all dark.
Well,
I got it.
on that one, I said we need to show
We
it
need to
zoom in,
look
because
at
it's not all just.
see a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's like for the general public, yeah,
Right.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all hot.
So for this one, are you thinking you'll
Yes.
drop it down?
Well, I think what we'll do is we'll just make a
Or do
little
an
circle
inset.
somewhere and do a little
Ah,
inset.
yeah.
Yeah, so people can see that there are actually low, medium, and high.
I've not disagreed with this process since we started in terms of the concept of marsh migration. But I think it's important to realize that as I live with this where I live, it's not, the marsh isn't migrating. The water levels are.
Yes.
You know, that's what it boils down to. So the wet areas are, are increasing and they are migrating. We really aren't seeing a growth from the standpoint of the public. We're not seeing a growth in the marsh. And in fact, a lot of the marsh with this kind of inundation is disappearing.
Right.
Because the water levels are so high, so we don't even get the grasses that we used to. So that's just one thing. Another thing that, people might say, well, what does marsh migration mean? Are we gonna have marsh grasses growing up? We're gonna have, so.
It's just, it's displacement of the current marsh to new locations because of sea level rise.
I mean, I think part of it is that the hope is if we can conserve some of that land where it might move to, that over time, you would get a recreation of marsh vegetation in those places where it becomes wet. And I think, at least from the state perspective, when they talk about it, it is that if towns can protect those areas, that to allow that to happen over time, it's not gonna happen quickly, but to allow that to happen over time, then that's a good thing for them to do, because the water's coming whether you like it or not.
And so we'd rather maintain the marsh
Right.
rather than converting it to a mud flat.
One question is, how much buffer do we really have in Scarborough for that migration to happen?
Probably not enough.
And it's different in different areas.
And we talked about this morning, because the way that the marsh migration data is created has to do with topography. And, the reality is that the water, as the water comes up, that topography is gonna change also. So the places where the marsh might be able to migrate will expand. Because there's places now where it's blocked, by something,
Route
the
one.
Eastern Trail.
Right.
Route 1, like,
Right.
but when those things have to be changed, that might allow the marsh to move in other places. So over time, that map will change. But
this
that's the
is-
best we got right
That's all
now.
part of the strategy.
Yeah, and this will be looked at in more depth in the NOAA grant and then also in our vulnerability assessment. So we're just kind of like calling it out a little bit here, but
Right.
it's going to be discussed in much more
Yeah.
detail in other
Yeah, the vulnerable system.
documents.
Yeah. There's a whole lot more to think about. But yeah, so on this one, we would zoom in so that people can see that it isn't all just the dark color.
And I can add a little bit more explanation to the blurb before that about marsh migration and what it means.
Yeah, I think that that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Just to kind of, to Doug's point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought that we do have working lands that are in water, I guess, and because it only looks at, terrestrial.
Yeah.
Just some acknowledgement that we do have working lands that are in the marsh or in
Right.
submerged areas and,
And there is a connection between conserving land and healthy fisheries.
Yeah,
so-
exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, we can definitely add. Yeah, and we might want to put something in at the beginning of this, that when we did remove all of the submerged
Yeah,
areas, so it doesn't, so this particular plan is not addressing
Correct.
aquaculture, fisheries, or other.
Yeah, at least
uh,
acknowledging that. I thought
yeah,
was
just
important, so
put
people
that in there.
understand that,
Yeah.
right? That we're not ignoring it, it's just that it's not really.
yeah, and I think that that was implied with the first map.
Yeah.
That kind of showed the land area. with
Right,
open
yeah,
water
you say
removed, but
we
were
were not including, okay,
We might want to point out that by removing open water, we therefore,
right.
Yeah.
this is not considering, that sort of working waterfront, fisheries issues.
I just was making a
Yeah.
comment, yeah, and that's sort of why you have that big swath that the way the purple
Yeah.
is on the way, it turns out, yeah.
And I would say the focus area map is something that Autumn and I have chatted a bit about, and I think it would be helpful to get the committee's input on. There's another version that was circulated here at the meeting, which I will send out for those who are on Zoom. I'll send that out afterwards because I don't have it to share on the screen. But basically looking at the high priority areas in relation to what's currently protected. Rather than looking at the kind of the connected purple blob, it's the underlying information that created the purple blob that's on the screen.
Right.
And so the map with the purple blob makes it a little bit less obvious which parcels are kind of our priorities, so that people don't necessarily
Start
think,
freaking out.
yeah, thank you, exactly, so people don't start freaking out. Like, for some reason. Not that you can see. I think, did we just lose the owl?
Yeah, it's not lit up in.
All right. Hold, please. Technical difficulties. All right,
The eyes are flashing.
we might be back. People in Zoom land, can you still hear us and see okay?
Yeah, we can hear you and see the screen, just no video of the room there.
We can't hear you. Okay, cool. I don't know what's happening.
Seriously.
The owl's reconnecting.
Make an owl one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's how you know it's connected.
When you first made it does a little eye blinking. It's very cute.
All right. Hey Noah, can you give me a thumbs up if you're good on your end?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, so, yeah, so I guess the question is, what do people on the committee think about, the blob that we drew? Clearly it's gonna need some editing, right? Because it was a first pass at picking up all of the purple on this map. But also making it not, because there's a certain amount of land that you wanna be able to conserve, and really some of this will come down to how you wanna use the map. And you can use both map, this isn't saying this is the only thing you can use, right? You might still use this for some purposes. And this for other purposes, in different ways, but, the reason for blobbing it is that it's not connected to any parcels or any particular, because some of the data that we used was parcel related, and so with the purple on, with this new map that we created, you can see the boundaries of particular parcels, and so you might want to not, and you can see it on the old map too, the darker orange, some of that, is parcel related. Some of it isn't, but, so basically what we did is just draw a sort of a outline around the outside edges. Well, no, not the edges, but I gave it a little broad berth there.
Well, and I wonder about, what are thoughts on showing in the purple blob what's already
Right.
protected?
And putting that conservation land in there, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful because I think there are some people who are gonna look at this, they're gonna go straight to this map.
Yeah.
And they're gonna go, oh my God,
Yeah.
they're gonna take all this land.
Yeah,
And so I think we have to, maybe remind ourselves, and I haven't gone through the detail, but, in the strategy section, this is not a taking, this is
Right.
not, we're not sending out a
notice of.
yes, that we're gonna buy all of this
Yeah.
land. It's simply, these are areas that have been identified and we're gonna work through.
And should opportunities arise?
Exactly,
That's what we need
opportunities
to
arise
focus for when
and
opportunities
to the extent,
arise, right.
and I do think when we get to talking about ordinances too, we have to talk about, how there may be opportunities for increasing height to help with,
Yeah.
lowering impervious cover. Just throw a few bones out there to make people think, this is not just a wholesale, the ordinance is gonna change and I'm never gonna be able to do anything with my land. And that's not what this plan is, but we need to make it easy for people to understand that that's not what's going on here.
Yeah, and I think, the idea of creating the more blobby map in terms of ordinance is to say, within this area, we want to offer opportunities that aren't available other places, right?
Exactly.
For either
Exactly.
straight up conservation or conservation subdivisions or whatever other mechanisms you all decide you want to use or that work out as ones that can be used in the town. So, but I think we could on this map, so one, we'll work with you guys to, revise bring it in a little bit.
Mhm.
But also we could put this whole map on there.
Yeah, I
Right,
find
so we
that very
could show-
useful. Yeah.
We'll show this, that what's purple on this one as orange, just like it is up above, right? And it'll just get rid of all the less orange. And then put the conservation land and whatever this is in this purple on top of that purple, so that people can see that same thing that you were saying, like where it came from. Like this is from the highest values that came out in the work that we did, with the weighted matrix.
One thing I do like about the purple map is that it does cover swaths of western Scarborough that I think to some degree are underweighted because of
Yeah.
just,
Right.
so, and I think, that part of Scarborough should also be a focus because, that's where the greatest opportunities exist.
Yeah.
And we have many more constraints on the eastern side of, or the, of 95. And that's sort of where I was a little worried that, particularly like on connectivity. Well, yes, that's where trails already exist, but we need to connect these things. So.
Yeah, and when I was drawing it, I was cognizant of trying to pick up as much of that higher value area
Right,
that was connected, right?
Right.
So there's some pieces that aren't connected in this,
right.
right?
Mhm.
And I didn't put anything around them because I was really aiming for, using the none such as a way to like
Right.
connect everything up.
Right.
So much better reason.
The Balabi map has the word like general.
Yeah.
or overall focus area. I think it then has that connotation of like, oh, okay, this is just
Yeah,
an overview, not the nitty gritty.
Yeah,
So we'll need a version of this map that's usable.
Yep.
So, it doesn't have to be in the report, but as soon as we can.
I actually love this map.
The version of this map that has the full, street level detail.
Yep.
Because we'll be building it in to the evaluation process on that basis.
Yep.
And it'll just be one more piece of the evaluation process.
Yep.
But we'll be referring to a specific map that the town owns as a result of this process.
Yeah.
And be, saying there's a certain number of points
yeah,
being allocated based on whether they're in the purple or not in the purple, or partially in the purple or
Yeah.
whatever.
yeah. Yep.
So this map will replace the top map. Oh, so the top map,
No, I think we'll keep the top map the way it is.
can you take away the low category though?
Yeah, we'll
Because
make it white.
everything's just like.
Yes, we'll make the
peach.
we'll make the low white.
That's what I think Jamie and I were thinking about. And then
Yeah.
this is what I would do for my purposes when people come in for development. Is that top map, if you took away the low and then you do have that parcel, like you can zoom in,
Yeah.
not usable, but then I love this, but I would just feather these boundaries and not make them so blobby.
Yep.
But I would just feather it shades of purple if you like purple. And then because like this one picks up this corner down here that the one on the bottom doesn't.
Yeah.
Because it shows the connections and this one makes sense to me. It's like, oh, this is a huge, we're missing this one little swath of land here. This is
Yeah.
really,
Right, this could be, yeah.
yeah, that's important. So I would just take the first one, take away the light peach, use that, and then make this more, keep the dark green, because that's really important, and then make the other just a little bit smoother, but not so
Just a feather.
silhouette-y.
Keep the blobby thing in the middle though.
Yeah.
Between those three. The reason I say that is.
That
it's-
thing?
The purple blobby thing is a really good initial visual presentation of what is really the focus open space without being able to see any detail. And then you get to this, it
Yeah.
matters, for those of us who are, I don't care about the purple blobby thing, but, from the standpoint of the presentation, I think it does. I thought it was a really good visual thing, it kind of hits you in the face. And then you go to the detail.
Reminding me of something, does the purple blobby thing get us to 30 by 30? I wanna know, if you're gonna keep a blobby thing, can we
Yeah.
show like, this is what 30 by 30 looks like?
Yeah, we didn't measure it.
Oh,
we
but
will.
if you
Yeah.
could, okay,
Yep.
so have 3 maps then, like the specific parcelized data, kind of the overall blob. And then,
My one edit to the blob would be to change the already, like I said earlier, put the protected, call out the protected
Keep the
areas.
protected
in
Yeah,
the
so then it shows
back.
it's not such a huge lift. We're not just, raiding everybody's land in this
Right.
entire
Yeah.
area.
How much of it is
Yeah.
already?
I mean, really, you're establishing connectivity and there are,
Yeah.
and
I mean, basically, when I drew it, I used this and I went,
because
Yeah.
we're already at what, 23%?
Mhm.
And I would think that if we did that purple blob, that's more like 35% probably.
yeah, well,
So I'm just curious, like.
So what we'll do is we'll go back. I think we can do it with 2 maps and it's hard to say. I can see it in my head, but I don't
Yeah.
know that I can explain it to everybody. So we'll give it a try.
Okay,
But what we'll do is we can bring that in, but we'll make sure that whatever the purple shows, it gets you to 30 by 30 in the purple,
okay,
right? And then inside, and then on top of that, we'll layer this. So that you can also see the detail plus the existing conserved land.
Did you just say you were gonna limit the purple to 30 by 30?
We'll make sure that it is,
That's not. a
no, she
restriction.
just wants to show that, make sure. it
that
at
make
least
sure that
gets
it gets
there.
us there.
At least
Oh,
we're,
we'll make
I
sure
think
it's
we're
at least
there, I
enough.
just wanna be able to
Yeah,
say,
no,
yeah,
That's
we
a
are.
problem. You have 3 maps already. You have that top map, you have
Yeah.
that map, and then the next one's the same blobby thing.
Right. Just
Put
in
this
more
one-
detail.
Put
Yeah.
this one there, right there.
Yeah,
Because it's more of a logical step, you get the
Right.
visual of, okay, but that doesn't really mean anything, but it's a good visual. And then you get to this page is where someone wants to see, who really cares about this stuff, really wants to see what this means.
Yeah.
And this map really shows what we own versus where the purple is, so it's a good overlay.
okay.
We're not at the point yet, but we're talking about the map and Maggie, Doug and Andrews. If, once you guys review your scorecard and develop that piece again, whether it's integrating what's in this or the new things you're talking about. Having this big blobby map, if somebody were to came, and on the previous, can you go back to the previous one? Yeah, if an opportunity came where there was a parcel here to connect this one, which is not. Or this one that's not in this focus area, does that hurt?
it would. I think.
Well, from our evaluation process, it just means they don't get quite as many points. Because we don't have we're not going to.
Oh, no, I understand your
You know,
point.
the
I'm
town
thinking of
council
when it
changes-
goes to town council and they see it's not in the pretty purple thing. Are they gonna be like, what?
But we've been doing that.
We like checkboxes, don't we?
Yeah, yeah.
Todd, we've had this strategy in place for 20 years. This strategy right here.
Yeah.
This exact same thing. our strategy has been to acquire land up on the marsh for 20 years. So I mean, it's a key strategy. I mean, we, Friends of the Marsh, embarked on this years and years ago. So there's nothing new in terms of,
No, I know, you're just giving them new
focus areas.
facts, and when they see a
But we've
fact,
been-
it's a new.
We've been purchasing land outside of those areas based on the evaluation. So the evaluation that takes place is broad enough to handle a lot of different things. And there's, we're going to undoubtedly be brought pieces of land that don't fall in the purple area that look valuable because of connections, because
Yeah.
of other things, because.
I'm just asking the
Great.
question.
Because I can look at.
I will not be
this map.
here. You can do whatever you want. But what I'm saying is I'm playing devil's advocate and you got some counselor that just needs.
The pheasant,
Yeah,
then you're like, oh, it's really
Okay.
close, but if it's a hard line, it's that
Right.
block.
we
it's
get
taken
plans,
and
it's like if
it's
it's
white,
not
we
in
don't need
it, we
it.
don't believe it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
trying to
But
mitigate some of
people
them.
Understand what the purple stuff
Right.
is, the purple stuff is, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Buy all
Yeah.
this stuff.
I'm just being devil's
Based on
advocate for
a
somebody
very
new sitting on the
precise-
board that doesn't know jack about
I
jack.
mean, you look at that purple map, Broadstream Farm isn't even on the map,
Or Silverbrook.
or Silverbrook, Silverbrook's connections alone.
Yep.
Never mind the
Yep.
habitat. I'm not sure why it doesn't rate high enough, but it doesn't, and that just astounds me. So
Right.
we're going to have to, and
Well,
it's gonna be.
wait,
me
I
and
feel
the
like
committee,
we can
we're gonna have to
probably make some
educate-
modifications to this too, if
Yeah.
there are areas that definitely should
Yeah.
be.
We're gonna have to educate council that they shouldn't be thinking, oh my gosh, I have to buy in purple. Because the process for developing the purple was good and, it was a repeatable, appropriate quantitative approach. And it ties in a lot of different things, but that doesn't mean that we're only gonna buy properties there, at least that's what we're gonna write.
Well,
Council
I
can do what
hope
they want.
so. I'm a little worried that. That's always kind
Can I have a
of in
cookie?
this process. You're creating priorities, and then the idea is to stick to the priorities. Which means eliminating stuff, I understand that. Again, I worry a little bit about how much we weight things on state significance and not Scarborough significance. For example, that whole kind of southern tier of Scarborough, Ashmont Road area. A lot of that is forested wetlands and they're all headwaters of streams. And none of it's purple. The whole Grondon area, the town is taking is not purple. But then an area like Prouts Neck is purple, chances of us buying a parcel at.
We've already talked about that.
That's
That's coming up.
That's exactly, I was like, Proud's neck is purple, for God's sakes, make this not go away.
You have Roger Goodell down
Yeah,
there
it was like,
tomorrow.
no. This is not gonna,
Like, there won't be public access.
no.
So,
I will remove that.
so I mean, I know we're working on projects outside of the purple.
Right.
And so I do worry about what does that mean? And it's, obviously it's the town's choice of whether they're gonna support properties outside of that area.
I mean, this
But
area
I,
could
So
be
what does
extended
this
up.
map say?
So I think the key thing here is just to realize that this map serves more than one purpose. It's not I don't think you should think about this map as a guide to where the only places in town that you should buy land. It may be the map that says anything that's in this area has to be a conservation subdivision because we've decided that these are the most important areas, of town, and we want to make sure that any development that does happen within them happens in a certain way. So it may be, used in that way more, the blob map used that way, and then the original map with all the detail on it used for a point system, right? Because then you could say you get, 20 points if you're in the high, you get, 10 points if you're in the medium, and you get 5 points if you're in the low, or however you want to do that. So, and that would be for purchasing land, and that way you're not constrained by the purple for land purchasing, you're constrained by the data for land purchasing, but that the blob be used for things like, conservation subdivisions, like where solar goes, and do you want it in or out of those places? And if it's in, then it has to follow certain rules, or do you want to set up, if you're gonna do any commercial in that area, then you have to put money aside for us to purchase other land. So I think that the blob map may have other regulatory uses not related to.
But that's what, when I
purchase
say
of land.
councils, and it's not just councils, it's me, it's
Right.
Nicole's first day. You know, when I say don't know jack about jack, not that they don't know jack, they just don't know how it all connects.
Right.
And to them to expect to understand it, and so when somebody sees something, how do we not create a head wave that we then have
Right.
to deal with when we're trying to do good?
Yeah.
Right.
So what,
You know what I mean? That's what I'm afraid of, is that we're handcuffing
I guess
ourselves a
the
little bit
difference
with the
between
funding
the
piece.
broad map and this map bothers me.
Yeah.
This map, I really understand, and I see purple down here, and I see
Yeah.
purple in the areas he's talking about. I see what we purchased here, and I see purple over here. I don't over there.
Yeah.
So that,
what should
that's the
this,
difference in.
should the title of this map be? The blob?
What?
If it's all these different purposes, so
Yeah.
what should the,
So I would say that I would call this map the, well. I'll work on it,
Opportunity?
but
If you can't call it,
I
how
know.
does anybody?
Open space, I would call this open space focus areas. I would really call it a focus area, not that it's the only and not that it is the single, but
What
that
are
these are
focus areas?
focus areas.
You're gonna need a paragraph in there
Yes.
that says just all those things that you said a couple of minutes ago, on the
Yeah.
same page with it.
Yeah,
So we talked about 3 maps, which I like, Doug. So we
Yeah.
have the top one.
Yeah.
With the peach turned white.
Yeah.
And then we have this purple thing, and we'll adjust the purple
yes,
thing.
we'll adjust it, yeah.
But maybe it just says, it's a generalized map, right?
Yeah.
It's just a general, this is our area.
I think I was arguing for the purple map earlier, no, I don't like.
I know you don't.
This is how Doug and I operate. Doug's like, oh, and I'm like, oh, and Doug's like, I'm like, Doug.
We're just gonna appear about it from now on.
That's what we do. Yeah, and then, yeah.
This would be the map that's really important, right? And what I'm gonna suggest is that we get to strategies, because the strategies tie back to the map. And we really need to decide if we like the strategies and how we use the map for
Yeah.
that.
Sorry,
Yeah, no.
just for like visually differentiating between the purple blob and this like more detailed map, this is sort of along those lines, if this is like a suggested area. But it's still the same shade and opacity of purple as the detailed focus. I
Yeah,
think,
we
like,
will, yeah.
the first read getting confused, so maybe like there's a way to like.
Yeah, we'll make
visualize
it
it as a
different, yeah,
suggestion if it's, you know, like more, and, you know.
Yes.
Sounds like you're already doing.
yeah. But,
So
yeah,
the
good.
focus would be to try to ensure that what the council and other people are using as their strategic thing would be this, the purple here.
Right, the strategy's done
Not
late.
purple there, because.
The more
rounded
rounded purple.
And I understand what you're saying about the regulatory. I understand what you were saying about the regulatory, piece, so I understand the value of that kind of a map
Yeah.
from the standpoint of writing ordinances and doing certain things. But from the standpoint of how we want to acquire land and how
Right.
we want to.
This
manage
is the
things,
important map for that.
That's the
Correct.
one that we'd like people to be able to, and I'd rather not have to do what Todd was saying, which is trying to convince the council that what the consultant said we should do. No, that's not.
That's not what they said.
Because that doesn't go.
Yes, and so we'll keep working on refining this and making sure that it gets the point across that we want to get across. And just to address your point, Andrew, in the recommendations, under the data recommendations, it does say, like, should the town want to spend money to get better data, it can then be easily added to this process and then adjusted, right? So if the town were to go out and collect a bunch of local data, or some just magically appears, then then it could be added, in the matrix. You'll have all the information you need to adjust this with better data as time goes forward. So when that data is available, the town will be able to readjust these priorities, clean them up a little bit by adding better data. Without, and as far as I know, you could do that without having to go through the whole process again, because you're just updating the data.
so what's the relationship with that little pie chart to all of this?
That
Where is
pie chart,
priority
yeah,
Where is that referred to? Where does it connect with any maps? What is?
yep, so that pie chart is the way people voted on the different categories overall, like in the public meeting, online, everywhere.
So
And
all of these.
Yeah.
All of the
So
resource
what-
categories.
So
And
that
it's
seems like
that
it
is
needs
the
its
orange
own,
map.
its own
Yeah,
page or something.
and then, and so the map above, that final map, which is the same one on the next page, is the map that, so the map on that previous page is without any weighting from people using their, valuing different layers at different levels, different categories at different levels. The map below, which does not change a lot because the way that people valued stuff was fairly across the board.
Yeah.
It didn't pull, didn't really pull anything out in this particular case, that everybody was fairly even with the way they spent the money we gave them to spend. But that map includes the weighting of each of those 6 layers by the proportions in that pie chart.
So, well, I'd have to say that for me, maybe I'm just, visually impaired, but the colors don't match anything. So it threw me off.
Yeah,
So where is this connected and where can I see the orange?
yeah, the colors
Where-
match the previous maps.
Yeah, they match.
Those-
ones.
So those maps are the data and like the facts, right? And
Yeah.
then she took that bottom equals map and we showed that. And then incorporated the public's opinion
Is
and
the
created
next map, yeah.
this map. But yeah, to your point, Maggie, there's probably some more description,
Yeah.
especially some expounding on the public process to. So
Yeah,
this is factual. And then
Yes.
the next one, turn it over, that's the public's input and that's how they voted. So it didn't change it much because they were all kind of, all their money was like the same really. But
but and you're
Habitat,
doing all this without explaining anywhere the fact that we had
yeah, to your point, the public process is
public
at the
process.
bottom.
So, I mean,
So-
how is,
You
you
could
know?
even put a photo of like a human in this section
Yeah,
and
we
then
will.
like a little bit more and even acknowledge that it didn't even. I'd already have it, but it didn't change a lot, but
Yeah.
some more explanation and then I think people might understand it.
So let me just go back to the purple.
Yeah.
The 2 different focus area maps, because I understand the discussion you're just having, and I agree with it. I'm still having problems with my own need to, I'm gonna have to go to the council and explain why there's 2 different purple maps.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a totally different purple map than this one.
Yes,
I realize
Yeah.
it's not totally.
Yeah.
And I
know what you
realize
mean.
that they have different purposes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's clear.
Yeah.
It's really important that our administration here in town understand that these purple things are probably the more important thing to focus on than whatever the purple map is. And the reason I say that is that we just don't have they're not the same.
Yeah.
And I realize there's a reason for that, but
Yeah.
gosh, if we're gonna put out something that has priority areas, focus areas, let's have them be consistent.
Okay.
Even
Well,
if one's more general.
And I think we can get that with some wording choices. So this would almost be like, protection priorities, and the other one might be like ordinance and regulation priorities or something like that, and somehow differentiate or distinguish between.
Or we could just get rid of the purple blob map
Yes.
Or that.
and make the,
I think we
2
just,
maps,
I think we just found out what's going to happen when the 2 maps go.
because the blob's gonna change
gonna
and
be a-
maybe
it's
this
gonna
one
be a
just
problem.
becomes
You're
more
gonna be gone.
generalized.
We'll leave you a nice problem.
that sword swings both ways. That's what I'm afraid of.
You're gonna be gone, Todd's gonna be
Yeah.
gone.
Slightly more generalized.
Yeah.
And like.
Well, how about if we work on it, we'll work with you guys and we'll see if we can come up with a solution that works for everybody.
Yeah, and to
Good.
Helen's point, you can even just make this blob over this a bit more transparent. so
Yeah.
that
No, we
gives
will.
you the
Yeah.
A watermark.
That's a good idea.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I like a watermark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would definitely, that we will do for sure, but let's see how we can
It's decrease
play
the
with it and
opportunities
see
for
if we
confusion.
can get something that's more clear.
No matter what happens, everybody's gonna come in and go. "I love
Right.
you."
We're buying.
Yes.
Oh, look, we're at strategies.
Amy, I thought that was pretty good. You know, you want a usable document at the end, you know. Yeah,
Do.
yeah.
You're in the right way. There you go. Thank you.
Okay, So this, we took what we talked about last time and tried to pull it together into a set of strategies. So I guess question one is, do you like the way they're organized by the 30 by 30 and then subdivision or ordinance related and then data and education, like those 4 topics? That makes sense to everybody.
So, very basic question, how long will do we expect this plan to last?
Well, the last one lasted 25 years.
Yeah, what happens after 2030? I guess it's my question. Is that
Yeah.
our marker? Is that our marker, what the purpose of this? plan?
No, this was kind of to help us understand what we need to do to get to 2030, but hopefully if we do achieve 2030, that all conservation in Scarborough doesn't end at 2030.
Yeah.
So,
And I don't think any of all of those those are the strategies to conserve land. I mean, we called it the 30 by 30 because that was a goal of the plan, was to help.
Can we just say
direct,
and beyond?
we could say that, yep.
Why are we saying conserve 30% of Scarborough by 2030? Because that's not the purpose of the plan.
That's just one goal.
That's one goal.
There's
I mean,
more,
and that's a very serious goal the town has, thank heaven. But it really, those priorities, those strategies are not a 30 by
They are
30 strategy. They contribute to it in a very serious way. But and I also think we should be giving. I understand the need for you to make generalized recommendations, but we should account for the fact that we do a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
For example, in number 1, use the open space focus areas to prioritize the purchase. You want the council to do something different than we do now in terms of prioritizing purchases, because we have an evaluation process.
Right.
We have a board that doesn't.
Yeah.
If you're saying that that what we do right now is not adequate, then the council needs to know that. But no one from your end even knows what we do to evaluate properties. So,
So it could be continued.
Continue to.
well,
Continue the-
that's all I'm saying. is I
And it
think
could be
has
like
to be there.
incorporate the open space focus areas into prioritizing of conservation. That's what I intended, was for
That's
just
what we're
incorporate what we
doing.
just did,
I told you early on, I'm gonna start.
Yeah.
Because this
So,
stuff is really.
I mean, and I think, sometimes, so I agree that it's good to say what you're already doing, but I also think that if we leave something out that you are already doing, then that gives the council an opportunity to be like, well, it's not in the plan. So we want to make sure that even if we know, I mean, I know there's things in here that we put in that are being done, but we put them in here so that when you go to council, they can't
That's
do
right.
that.
That's
So it's just there for that purpose.
It's also an easy win, because you're like, check.
Yeah.
Check.
I thought they were all good.
Yeah.
Actually, I had no issues.
Yeah.
With them. Andrew might have better input, from his standpoint, but I like them. I don't want the council to be confused and think that you're recommending a different process than we already have.
Yep.
As opposed to recommending that the priority areas be built into that process.
Right. Yeah, so I'll just change that so that the language is clear.
And then on the strategies, again, I'm trying to minimize knee-jerk reactions. And I think what we may want to do is emphasize this idea of opportunities in the strategies, particularly I'm concerned about ordinance changes, and we want to say the ordinance changes could be both, we're not saying this in the thing, I just want to talk about their opportunities and incentives.
Like opportunity to develop a fee?
Well,
Soften the
no, I'm
language?
thinking, no,
I'm just
I'm not looking to soften the language of the I'm looking in the description of the strategies. To
Yeah.
say, we're looking for, the strategies look for opportunities. And they look to incentivize. Not take, force, whatever.
Yeah.
People go to the darkest places when they read things.
Yes.
So let's just put it in a positive light.
Yep.
To talk about incentives and opportunities. But it's particularly true in the commercial section. And then, well, I'll wait till we get there. Okay.
Are we still on this one?
Yeah,
Can you tell me 1.4, update town ordinances to encourage conservation? What would that look like? I'm
Well-
trying to understand, like,
Yeah.
what are you thinking that would be?
Well, I think when we talked about this a little bit, we talked about reviewing overall town ordinances and then if there are things in them that are disincentives to conservation, adjusting them in that sense.
Cause this is probably gonna be my council is gonna set their goals on December 18th, and go, Autumn, we'll update our town
Update the
ordinances
town
to encourage
ordinance, yeah.
conservation.
So we can take that one out. I think we had talked about it as, you know, so say, you know, I know some of the stuff we've talked about.
Karen has
is-
said yes, that's what's going to happen.
Isn't, you know, aren't we doing ordinances and strategies below? Do we need it? Do we
Right,
need
I
it
mean,
in
that's what I'm
this
saying, we
section?
could take it out
Yeah.
if it's
And leave
not.
like the more specific.
Right,
Yeah.
I think that this was
Well,
just
Just a
looking,
reference to the things
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
recommend below.
so we could definitely take out 1.4 from this section and just leave it in the next.
Leave the specific.
Right.
Okay.
Stuff
in
yeah,
the
that's
following
great, thank
section.
you.
Maybe
Right.
change
Yeah.
the buffer thing that we're trying to do with conservation commission, would that come under that? Updating the town ordinance to.
I mean,
I think so.
it's related for sure,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I was gonna say, like, I think the intent was like, if you wanted to pass things related to using natural, native species or, you know, the
Like
way that grass, you know, areas near roads are planted with new and different plants, or you're gonna require something else related to conservation that's not about purchasing land
Gotcha.
or, you know, or development, whether it be commercial or residential.
Karen has
Is
her
what I-
hand up, so. Go ahead, Karen.
Other Karen.
Other Karen, sorry.
Yep, no, I appreciate the conversation. I think the only thing I think about when I look at 1.4 is, you know, when we do go to make changes to ordinances, it's always helpful to have like the data behind why we're making those changes to support those changes. And so I apologize if I've missed part of the conversation, but I would be hoping that part of this plan would be kind of the data and research we need behind maybe some implementation and ordinance changes that will be coming down the road.
So I think we talk about other ordinance changes in other strategies as well that will relate to this, so. Yeah, I don't think we're gonna get rid of ordinance changes altogether, but that
No.
was just kind of
It's,
broad.
it's super broad,
Yeah.
and so I was trying to figure out what that really.
Yeah, we could just
It
remove that.
incorporate into 1.5.
Yeah.
Something about, review all town ordinances, blah, 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 updating as needed.
Right, that one is more specific.
I don't like the word encourage either.
Yeah.
In ordinance and encourage,
Right. Don't.
they don't.
Yeah,
they don't-
the ordinances are.
Either,
I know
either way, that's
yeah.
probably why.
You are
I'm
or you are not.
I think we strike that
I'm
1.4.
totally good to get rid of 1.4.
Okay. And
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I
and
know.
I-
A whole other section.
Other sections to add things
Yeah,
to, but yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
Yes,
Yep.
1.6.
Yeah.
The reference to high priority parcels, could we? Perhaps that means something that I don't understand, but we've just gone through a lot of detail on identifying focus areas. And I would, you know, from the standpoint of prioritizing, we would prioritize purchases in the high value focus areas,
Mhm.
is what I should think. So we haven't really identified priority parcels here.
Yeah.
So I'd prefer this to read from the standpoint of what we do now, to purchase, parcels in the, high
Focus
value
areas.
focus areas, inner focus areas.
That's good.
Yeah, that is really good.
Keep the language that.
Yeah,
And then 1.8.
Yep.
We're talking about an impact fee, so I feel like we should just go ahead and say that. Develop an impact fee to fund an open space. Unless there's a different type of mechanism that you're thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, in my first read, I probably mucked this up a little bit, because I said an in lieu fee instead of an impact fee, because it seems like we're able to implement an in lieu fee. more easily than an
I don't
impact.
know.
fee.
To an impact fee, I have a reserved space in chapter 415.
What's, I don't know. what-
You can
It's a different-
evaluate an
Yeah,
impact.
I would say consider
Yes.
implementation of an impact fee to fund open space.
Yeah.
That's probably what I would say. This one I would say consider.
Yeah,
but
that's
let's
a
not
something,
lose it.
just to give a choice.
Right.
There's opportunity to be a little broader here because. Nowhere in the plan, we talk about purchasing open space and funding that, but. How to maintain that open space in the long term, there's nothing about. How do we fund?
And commit to stewardship or something, just
So-
a simple,
A fee to fund and maintain open space,
Mhm.
create,
Yeah,
consider.
Is that part of 1.6 that you added in there?
So an impact fee cannot maintain things.
Yeah.
So you have to put another statement in.
and
about-
create.
So would you add it to 1.6?
I almost think that. The next step after the open space plan is there has to be a little bit of analysis study done on. How do we fund some of these things long term?
Well, maybe it's more general that instead of talking about the impact fees, 1.8 is evaluate fees. And
Or
you can
funding
put in
mechanisms,
parentheses,
yeah.
these funding sources
Mechanism.
for funding mechanisms for acquisition, maintenance.
I'd like to see number 8 say that. I'd like to
Sustainability.
say, I'd like to see
Stewardship.
number 8 say, create a development fee to fund open space. And to fund open space and to fund and maintain open space.
So you can't do a development, an impact fee to maintain, but what you could do is
Is-
consider an impact fee to fund open space acquisition. And consider and evaluate long-term funding mechanisms for maintenance and whatever.
Sustainable.
Does that sound like that? So
Yeah.
it's together, but it's two separate.
As long as it's legal.
Yeah, yeah, 'cause you can't do the maintenance. Or staffing or
I
any of
think
that.
it's worth having that maintenance piece in there
Yes,
somewhere.
cause it's gotta be
Yeah.
considered. You
Yeah.
can't just get the land and not know what to do with it.
And Karen commented that we want an open space impact fee, so she is in agreement. with
Open,
this.
yeah, yeah.
All right, any others on this strategy?
Great. So what is, to your point about specific language, what is work with neighboring towns? What is that? What does work with look like?
Well, I think, it's something that we're starting to think about now is. Other towns have their own open space priorities, they have their own issues related to. What they need to do. And there's opportunity to connect some of these. Whether it's trail or wildlife or watershed protection. We're just looking at a artificial political line on a map. Should be talking to Gorham and Saco and Old Orchard and Buxton. Going, where does it make sense to
Yeah,
do some of these things?
Yeah.
cause here's all of
There
us.
it is, right?
Where's there, so yeah.
And I think the purpose of that being in there is, again, it's to allow council to be able to say, when you say, we want to talk to that other town. And they're like, why? We only care about Scarborough, then you can say, in the plan, it says we should talk to those other towns.
Are there any regional cog
Yeah.
initiatives on this area in terms of open space or any?
I have not seen any regional.
We'll see what might come about with the new trails.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bond that was
Right.
passed.
Yeah.
If there are any opportunities that arise from that.
Yeah.
I would suspect they would use data like this from all, and kind of do this overarching.
So is it with a view to get almost a smaller regional approach?
Or at least protect the opportunity and create an opportunity.
Partnership opportunities.
Right. And the old,
Yeah, right. So, it depends upon. What town priorities are in each town and whether they mesh together.
Align.
right.
Yeah.
But also even for funding for Andrew's purposes or anybody else to say that it's already in the book, so when Buxton comes and says, hey, with the council of Scarborough, please write us a letter of support, because we're gonna butt up, there's no discussion, just write the letter.
Well, there might be grant funding opportunities.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely, but
Yeah.
having that part, right?
Like Maine Outdoor Heritage Fund, right?
Yeah,
They love it when people talk to each other.
The more partners you can bring to the table.
Yes,
But from the standpoint of this plan, 1.9 is adequate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's not try
Yeah.
to go to the next stage. The next stage
that's.
is
what I
how
thought.
to
Yeah.
do some of these things, and that's not
That's
where
where I
I
hope it's going.
Okay, so.
Thread the needle.
Thoughts on these particular strategies?
So these are ordinance review.
So we'll make, let's make 2.1 match up more with the language we've just
Yep.
talked about, so they kind of say the same, similar
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, so that 1.8
Yeah.
and 2.1 reflect each other.
2.2, can we say subdivision ordinance changes? I had a question on require protection of wildlife corridors.
Yeah,
How to, what would I require of a developer who is presenting a subdivision plan to show me so that I could review that? Like, how do I review that? You know, wetlands, I have a wetland scientist delineation, this, I was wondering how to do that.
yeah.
It could be the habitat connectors.
Yeah, I mean, there is the habitat, there is the connector data between large undeveloped blocks. From beginning with habitat that they've created, which are, I mean, they are wildlife corridors. That's their
And then
purpose.
to Andrew's point, if we ever do.
And
our
if we ever do
own
more.
data,
Yeah,
use that.
yes,
Yeah, well, I mean, there's general guidelines in terms of what buffer should be for vernal pools, for example.
Right, got that.
Um,
I guess I'm struggling with how am I gonna tell somebody, I need you to protect this. deer corridor.
I mean,
Like, what's
most of the wildlife corridors are along the waterways to
Okay.
start with,
Okay.
so. You know, that's the place they most often are gonna move. I mean, there's some that are gonna move across less wet places, but. So, but I think that some of that is included, it's both in the data that we have in the large undeveloped blocks from. Beginning with habitat, and I suspect that's a thing that people are going to move. To get more, that's one place where I think that it's pretty likely that there'll be more data, because again, as people are talking about climate changing. Wildlife needing to move. You know,
Can we say consider instead of require? on
we
that one?
can.
That way, it kind of implies
Yeah.
that we have more work to do
Yeah.
before I can get to a
Right.
point where I'm requiring
Totally.
you to do this.
Yeah.
And I'm more comfortable with
Absolutely.
that.
Some of that I don't see as necessarily development code as much as town capital projects working with the state. So like when the bridge over Gorham Road gets replaced,
Right, making sure that there's.
making
passageway.
sure that there might be some type of corridor underneath it for wildlife.
Yeah.
And there's other places in town like the same thing applies.
I mean, we could. Yeah, so, we could. I mean, the only reason I put it in there thinking about subdivision is, you know, thinking about if. If it's not gonna be a required conservation subdivision, what other things do you wanna address? You know, in places where you maybe aren't gonna be required to do a conservation subdivision, but if we know that there's a wildlife corridor there. First, you know, that should be protected the same as a trail is protected.
I'm okay with it saying, as long as it says considered, so.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
we can change it to that.
Develop some more language.
Yep,
There's provocative stuff here, and it's very, very important. And part of the issue is how do you, and this is what Autumn is talking about, but I think the idea of conservation best practices is wonderful. I think one of the issues we'll have as a town is what can we do? And I live in the marsh, and I see people, and they're not developing like crazy, but we're building a lot of houses, and everybody has a big lawn.
Yeah.
And I don't think a single one of those landowners is the least bit aware that your typical lawn absorbs about 20% of the net. In other words, 80% of that rainfall washes your fertilizer into the water.
Yeah,
And, you know, people just don't understand these things, so that's part of the issue, and that's a how-to, that's getting, what Maggie's talking about, it's a how-to, it's not, but I like the fact that it's in there. I do wanna go back to something I mentioned earlier, in 2.1. If you are recommending we create an additional open space fund to what we already have, that's one recommendation, I don't agree with it, but that's one recommendation. But we do have an open space fund, we have an evaluation process, so I would rather see, if you're not recommending an additional special new fund.
Yeah.
Which, but
I
we're
was
not
not.
gonna do. you
yeah,
know,
I
have
was
fun.
not recommending a new fund.
So then let's make that consistent in the sense
Yeah.
of, ensure
Adjust.
that the open, that the evaluation process or whatever for the open space funds and impact fees are consistent with the conservation priority down.
Yeah. Will do.
Does the current open space fund, what is it used for? Is it used for maintenance of open space at all, or is it, because that's where I would see a fund needing is, you know, the impact fees are to acquire, where would the funds sit for maintenance?
Yeah, the land bonds, we don't have specific wording that says that land bond funds should be used just to purchase land or to ensure that there's any kind of maintenance afterwards. However, we did adjust it years ago to allow us to include the overall cost of a project that's brought to us, not just the purchasing price. Because that overall cost, you know, not doing that would be really inappropriate over the long term. So we evaluate now based on a price that includes the overall cost of the project, including you know, maintenance. You'd have to look the way Andrew the way the trust does their budgeting, but we really like that, and we look for the same thing we were doing from someone else. Although we don't have property insurance,
So let's,
nobody's offering.
so for those projects that include where does that end, which have a budget line for maintenance, that goes to the purchaser? That goes in,
Part of the whole budget.
it's part of the whole budget, and they get those funds for maintenance for the long term.
Yeah, and what we've been doing is, when we reviewed that and reworked it, a lot of those requirements are coming from the land trust on their side, and we're funding more of the purchase price of the property and the contribution from, like, in this instance, the land trust is for their stewardship and stuff, so it works out well in the sense how it's broken out.
Just trying to ensure that stewardship
Absolutely.
is funded over the long term.
But what about properties that don't involve the land trust?
We don't get them. I'm not saying it can't happen.
I'm just saying, so you don't budget for stewardship
We
on
don't.
those projects?
No, but that's something we'd
But we don't
evaluate,
See them.
right?
Yeah.
But if we did get them, we'd evaluate it under the same kind of.
You know, in 20 years, there are two types of properties that have come before the land bond. One is from, one side's a land trust, and the other side is historic properties of the town. Decided to.
Farmland trust.
Maine farmland trust.
Oh, yeah.
Maine
farmland
farmland trust.
But those are typically easements.
Yeah.
And so Maine Farmland Trust, as part of their requirements, have to set aside stewardship funds and legal defense funds, which are not necessarily directly called out in the land bond language. So typically those are, it almost always comes down to just the acquisition price in the land bond. Be nice if that was a little broader, but it's been set as precedent now for 24 years. The town doesn't have any dedicated pots of money for stewardship, as far as I know. So that's something that I think out of this open space plan really needs to come out again, you know, how are these properties taken care of? How is
I think you have
basic
trails like we
plant
have.
control done, how is trail maintenance done?
Yeah.
How are other infrastructure costs done? You know, if we ever get to the point of having some type of bathroom facilities at certain properties, how are those maintained? Where are those costs coming from?
Yeah, and where I really see that coming in is when if you're gonna have connectivity and trails.
Yeah.
And there's no, it's just only budget for acquisition, then it falls either on the town or whoever has acquired that to maintain it, so.
So we sort of have that as a side note to 1.8 on the other, but should we just separate it and make it a stronger strategy that we really need to consider stewardship and?
Yep.
Let's do that, and then make it just really. It's a big, we need to address it.
Yep.
Instead of putting it just with the impact. fee. Back to this one, I had a question about. So this is residential strategies.
Yep.
And. So some of these conservation best practices for non-conservation subdivisions, I was trying to envision what those would be that relate to the subdivision ordinance and that process. And then I was trying to, understand if you're proposing for residential land, a landscaping list, because I have a commercial landscape list. But I just want to make sure if you're proposing we start regulating what homes and residents are putting on their individual lots.
Well, with
Mixture
my
and
world, yes,
understand.
but.
Just say it out loud.
But I think, so I left that rather open-ended so that I think that would be something that would need further discussion, like what kinds of conservation best practices does the town want to create for subdivisions, for all subdivisions, whether, not the so not something that's in conservation subdivision, which we're trying to expand a little bit, right? But if it's not that kind of subdivision, then what are those best practices that the town wants to? And so I think, I don't know what those. would
Okay,
be
because I
yet.
don't either. I was like, I
Yeah,
feel like
I mean, I
somebody,
could come up with a list of
that's
them.
why I was trying to come
Yeah.
up with like what those might be.
You know, I mean, it could be that, you're going to leave more space for wetlands, you're gonna have bigger buffers than you have now, where you might expand that. That you're, the maximum setback is part of that, conservation. So, I mean, that we already put in there as,
Mhm.
I think you should just have that. But you might wanna add it to a possible, that might be a conservation best practice.
Could this be incentive based, like, non-concert, I mean, to have, if you do these steps, out of this menu. And incorporate it into your subdivision, you would have, I don't know what, some sort of, what would a developer want in exchange for that, or could get, that would be incentive for that, so.
I don't know. I need to know what they would be.
Yeah, and I didn't include incentives in this because the incentives are under the conservation subdivision.
Right.
So you could take it out altogether and not worry about it. I was just trying to puzzle through if the conservation subdivision thing can't be changed, like if politically it ends up not being something that can be modified, or, you can't expand when that is required to be used. Then falling back from that, what kinds of conservation best practices, which might be some of the things that are in the conservation subdivision,
Mhm.
would you want to change your subdivision ordinance to include? Does that make sense? Like, so
Yeah,
it's
I was
sort of
just-
a,
I
it was
just
sort
wanted
of a
like a
backup.
list in my head. So
yeah,
I could
so I
really
think it would
analyze
be
what they
like
would be.
protection of waterways, protection of trails, protection of,
Okay.
some habitat, related to and similar to what a conservation subdivision would be, but how far you thought you could do that without it being created as a conservation subdivision.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, maybe even with a lawn, ratio of lawn to
Yeah.
undisturbed natural
the-
area, yeah.
And I think all these things sound great. And they
Right.
come through our process and they get planning board approval and they build it and
And
then
then you can't,
I don't know what to do with it.
right, I
I'm
mean, I
not
took
looking
out,
at-
I took out the
yeah.
mowing thing.
It's a lot of like Google Earth, you guys moved the boulders, you cut the trees.
Yeah, right.
You've
No.
added, 20 yards of fill.
Yeah,
What have you done? So that's,
yeah, no, I understand the require, the
yeah, I'm just
ability to
always
be able
trying
to
to make sure I
enforce, yeah,
can enforce things.
yeah.
So for you, what is better is sort of what you can enforce in terms of how they build it and not.
How they maintain.
How they maintain it.
Single family. So what we've
Yeah,
been
right.
trying to do is saying, you can't have wetlands on your, you don't get to count so what I would say, you don't get to count wetlands for lot area.
Yeah.
You have to put it in common ownership.
Yeah.
You can have a smaller lot, there's your incentive.
Yeah.
But that's what I was kind of getting to.
Yeah.
It's that kind of stuff, okay.
Yeah,
You know, Autumn, as you're dealing with this, I apologize because this is the scope of what we're talking about right now. But as you're dealing with these things, it's really, really difficult, and I understand. There's a lot of folks on various committees. It might be worth getting some people together and just talk about it and say, you know, from the perspective of the reality of trying to work with developers on these things. And the other side, which is saying, oh, no, we gotta conserve everything, no, I want runoff. How do we put in how do we identify some real things that make sense? And determine what you're already doing, what you're not, and I mean, we'd love to help, you know, there's people who'd like to help, so we could make some general statements in here from a strategic standpoint that allow the council to accept the fact that conservation management is important for subdivisions, et cetera. And then we could get people together to talk about what that means, to try to help you, not to tell you what to do.
I have a lot of help on a pretty regular basis. You're coming now. No, and don't think, I'm not gonna go write all these things in a bubble. I'm trying to process them. My brain
Yeah.
works very methodically. Like, is this something I can get to? What might this
So-
look like?
And we just had the
How-
discussion at the department
Yeah.
head level was, we get goals and we get plans, but do people really understand how we implement them and what it takes to implement them so we can actually do the work?
I like to have attainable goals.
Yeah.
And so
So-
when I ask questions, it's more like, can I get us?
We're not
there?
questioning, we're asking
No, I
questions.
totally get that. Like, so one thing I was thinking of in this is like, you could require box culverts in every subdivision, right? Because they're way better. Right.
Just dealing with
Everything.
stormwater.
Yeah, because they're way better for everything. You could use LID practice, you know, like,
Well, we're.
I mean,
getting
which
to
you,
that.
yeah, so,
Okay.
you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that's what I was thinking of
Okay.
for that.
So I apologize, I'm gonna have to leave.
Yeah.
I gotta leave 2 in 5,
But I,
10 minutes.
pursuant to what we were just discussing on the implementation plan, I have been through many of these kinds of things. And when things are atomized by task, and to Doug's point, nobody's looking at the whole process and how these things all link together, it falls on your office or it falls on your office and it just becomes a bunch of things that get done, but no, so I would advocate for some kind of looking across the process.
Yeah.
Across the tasks, and I don't know if that, I hate to say another committee, but, some kind of input that looks across.
Okay, we'll look into that.
Yeah.
Yep, thanks. And so Autumn, the one reason I didn't put any detail under that one is because I didn't wanna make it so you had to do those things, right? Like, that just felt like in that particular instance, that was getting a little ahead of my skis. Or your skis.
I just wanted to know what you had in
Yeah.
mind for it, so I.
Yeah.
When we
sort
did
of
this 20 years ago, we didn't have a person like you in the room. When we did the whole thing, that was wrong. It's just so helpful to have, so important.
Keep buttering me up, Doug. I'm putting you on more committees. Taking your own role over there.
All right, so I think I am wondering in the subdivision changes, if maybe what we should do is develop conservation best practices for non-conservation subdivisions, and then maybe 2.3, 2.6, maybe even 2.1, maybe are under that,
Yeah,
like, those
that
are all
seems to make
things that go along with that,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And then we'll put,
Simple.
and the town should also consider other
Yeah,
possibilities.
I like that, yeah.
I think that'll help organize that a little bit better. Okay. Under the conservation subdivision? Any thoughts?
My wheelhouse.
I was gonna say, I think Autumn has thoughts.
I did make all the changes you asked me to already. But I can make more.
These are fine.
Do you think there's anything missing? Does anybody think there's anything missing?
The struggle with our conservation subdivisions is, you know, I can't get too small because we don't have a sewer, so you always
Right.
have to have enough land out to do
Right.
your septic.
Yeah,
Right.
And so you still are looking at
yeah.
half an acre or maybe more a lot, depending on your soil.
Do you want to consider allowing septic on the common land
Yeah.
so that you could get smaller?
Mm-mm.
Not common septics, but allow the septic to be placed on the
No,
common.
because then
Okay,
that'd be private maintained.
Okay.
No, I don't think so.
All right.
I mean, I may think about it, but I don't think so.
Okay.
Well, and then the common land is typically wetlands too in these areas.
In
So
your-
we
yeah.
definitely don't want
Yeah.
septic
we don't
systems
want
there.
them there.
It's
Yeah.
great until you have to dig everything up and replace it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's 2.3.6. Is that about our rate of growth ordinance? Evaluate current residential zoning districts and the permit limit per
Mhm.
zone, allow a higher permit limit for conservation subdivisions. I don't think we wanna go there. Karen, are you listening? Cause our rate, so we have a rate of growth ordinance right now. That allows 25 single family homes per year in RF, R2, R3, and R4.
We could consider a higher permit limit for conservation subdivisions during the next review, because it gets reviewed every 3 years. So you could say, punt that to the next.
In the next review process.
Maybe.
The purpose of this plan isn't to recommend the increase the number of permits. So I mean, let's leave.
I
that
think
for
we
someone.
should do that.
Yeah, just.
Cause
just
I
do the
don't know if
first part
that's
of
an
the statement.
incentive. I did have, so the long range planning committee, you all probably don't have the zoning map committed to memory, but the entire.
Kind of over
If you
here.
picture
Yeah.
the turnpike,
Mhm.
everything is light
What's-
green, that's all RF, and then everything along coastal communities except Higgins and all over is RF. And so long range planning committee is considering evaluating our RF districts. And so I'm gonna give you this, there's a desire to create various levels of RF, so we'd like to propose a recommendation to incorporate in here to address variations, trailheads, village nodes, and the rural farming district centered around goals for preservation. So to use this plan
Mhm.
to create those areas. So we don't want to have a village node in the RF district in a targeted area, but we would like to be where people, there's a connection.
Yep.
opportunity. So if we can just. come up with something for that.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's 2.3.6. A problem from the standpoint of evaluating current residential zoning districts and permit limit per zone. I mean, it's a reasonable recommendation, even though we may not need to make much of an evaluation because we've done.
Yeah,
so much
I
work.
think you can take
Yeah.
allow, change allow
Yeah,
to
let's-
consider, maybe.
You don't really need to allow higher permit limits
But
in
I,
there
Could-
as a recommendation.
Could you say, consider open space requirements or whatever we want to call that, as a consideration in the next evaluation of the growth ordinance or the. So you're just saying, hey, in 2 more years, when we need to review this again.
What
let's
is the
check-
open space plan?
Yeah,
say?
let's check in with the open space plan. Does the open space plan tell us anything about permits? Keep it very general,
Mhm.
but keep it to the cycle of review.
So it's more like consider the impacts of
Yeah.
the open space master
Yeah.
plan during
During
the
the
rate of
next
growth.
During the next.
Yeah, so it's not really
evaluation.
like increasing permit.
No.
numbers. Yeah,
No, it's
just
just,
make sure we align with it, yeah.
So would you make, evaluate current residential zoning districts and the permit limit per zone period that, and then there'd be another one?
No,
No,
it'd be a
just
whole
consider- yeah,
Okay.
Consider the open space, the goals and strategies, consider this plan. Like
During the
during the
review-
review.
during the next review
Of the rate of
of the rate of.
And
growth
it's
ordinance.
next year. It's.
Or let's
Oh my
do
God.
during
One more
maybe every review or not the next review. but
During the
every-
review,
during
during
the
the rate
review.
of growth, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason I was thinking about that is if we're gonna give a density bonus, it's not really helpful to give a density bonus if they're,
You can't get
if you can't get the.
Yeah,
permit to
and that's why-
build it. So,
Timing it with
Yeah.
the review of the rate growth ordinance.
Yeah.
Lets you
yeah.
make a proposal there.
Jamie, I'll come see you after I get a meet with Tom, contractor.
So for commercial, we talked about modifying the impervious surface requirements.
And I'm gonna
Yep.
stop you right there on
Yep.
that 2.41.
Karen's
Yeah.
going to see it.
Yeah, not that we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I'm just again trying to make sure people know that we're considering the whole breadth of possibilities.
Yeah.
So if we could say something like lower the maximum percent of impervious surface lot coverage, considering ideas such as height limitation or height increases or building height.
Parking reductions.
Parking reduction, sure, and the rest of those. I just want to give a couple of.
Yep.
You know,
Things to add.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
and then that's the question, does 2.5 really belong as 2.4.2? Or,
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
we just had a long conversation with the Long Range Planning Commission
Yeah.
Committee, and there was, I think, general confusion about height increases and understanding that that can be a valuable part
Yeah.
of conservation.
Yep.
Just like 3 months, 4 months ago, 5 months ago. That all blends together.
Just to make sure that I got that, consider building height increases or.
Yeah, you could just say considering building height if you don't want to
Yeah,
say.
considering
increases.
building
I'll let
height.
Autumn be the.
Okay.
All right, any other on the commercial?
Jamie, what do you think about this one? Consider expanding stormwater management plan requirements beyond development that require site plan review?
Yeah, I was just.
What would
reading
that be? Like, what doesn't require site plan review?
We
For
talked-
commercial.
We talked about this, and now I don't remember what was that when we chatted, we said. But there were some. Must be redevelopment, no, that would still require.
It would
site
still
plan
require
review.
site plan
I think
review.
there's no commercial.
I
that
can't think of
requires
what
site
would
plan.
not require site plan if you were physically doing something.
Yeah, I don't know if it's, maybe the sites that wouldn't disturb an acre and so don't trigger our DEP post-construction like requirements and
Maybe,
things like
maybe
that.
that's-
They still have site plan though.
Yeah, they still have site plan.
So should we just take it out, or
Oh, yeah.
is there a stormwater thing that we should put in? Something related to stormwater that we should put in?
Is it
Let's not.
consider
I
incentives for expanding stormwater management requirements or just period? I don't know what those are, but.
Well, here's another question. I think we could probably do that one for. What about for commercial properties? We look at this map.
Yeah.
A lot of the purple is on commercial corridors, like Route 1.
Yeah,
So what would we do if those projects come in and we have? What do we do? A lot of it's in RP, so that's good, resource protection zone, but what do we do to, say you have a development that's coming in and they have a trail connection possibility? What would they get if they donated land to the Scarborough Land Trust or something? Is there something we could?
well, here we said we're gonna require them to preserve the high value open
Okay,
space.
so we've got that.
And allow for the use of an impact fee under certain circumstances and in certain locations. So
Okay.
again, that was to give an out for if there's a certain kind of commercial development that the town wants.
Okay,
That's in a high value area, then they would have to pay into that impact fee in that, but we'd rather have them preserve
Okay.
stuff in location. Is that, so that's what I was trying to
I
write
checked it
there.
off before, so yeah. Since I was just like, oh, the map, the zoning, yeah, that's good.
Okay,
I will just throw out that probably the second greatest threat to Scarborough Marsh is stormwater. There's sea level rise. You know, we're on the course right now for losing vast swaths of tidal marsh to Phragmites, invasive species. And almost all that can be tracked with stormwater coming into the marsh. And the stuff that it carries. Not a burden, I think, that should be put on just development. It's a problem that the community as a whole has to address. But, you know, we have to figure out a different way of dealing with stormwater in the future.
So do you want 2.6 to just say, consider upgrading stormwater management plan requirements?
I was thinking maybe to your point, and we keep talking about stewardship, we don't have anything. What about we add a whole nother section that's, you know, stewardship? Cause we
Of
already
county
need to
things,
take care
yeah.
of what we already have.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, cool, we're gonna get more, but we're just talking about what we're gonna do. So maybe that is a strategy to take care of those invasive species that we can fall back, because we're protecting what we already have, the future of what we want. Would that be appropriate to have it in its own, like, section? And then maybe we
I
can
don't know
pull
that it
to-
falls under commercial though.
Yeah, because not commercial, no,
No,
put it under
it's
its own
own
new,
section.
could be residential, commercial, shoreland, it could come under general. Or general could be general and stewardship or something like that, so it,
So I mean,
you could
Just-
add it.
related to stormwater is, I just keep going back, we talk about LID for
Yeah.
residential, we can speak to it for commercial, that's coming anyway. With our stormwater permit, and it's going to be mandated by the state, so we can add some language in there about,
and is your stormwater gonna include? Like currently, most towns only require 25-year storm. Like that, they check to make sure that the way they've engineered it is to the 25-year storm, and
I can't
You might
remember what
wanna
our requirements
bump
are.
that up to the 100-year storm, since the current 100-year storm is more like the
Right.
every other year storm.
Twice a year.
Twice a year. So, I mean, so those, I think those are other things in stormwater management that, you know, that at least having the engineers run the model to make sure that the way they created that parking lot is gonna get the stuff going in the right place, and it's not flowing too fast, and it's not going.
Well, yeah, and the other thing that I'm thinking of too is that currently our regulations only look at flow rate. So,
Right.
and
I
not
know.
quantity.
That's DEP.
Yeah, so, but we could potentially look at doing something on a local level that says that you can't have more water coming off of your site than is currently, like your.
Right. It doesn't just have to
Post-development.
flow at the same rate that
Right.
it used to flow,
Right.
right? But you can't have like 10 times more.
But I think I would want to get Angela's input on anything related to stormwater.
But we think that stormwater should maybe go under a stewardship. The whole, because stormwater really refers to the town, its infrastructure, the residential, its infrastructure, and the commercial. It's not, doesn't really fall under any one of those things. So a category that's like the overall.
Would that stewardship address sort of what I think, I mean, is the current stormwater system sort of inadequate, right? So is that, would
Yeah.
stewardship then sort of go to addressing that, either
So,
upgrading or?
yeah, so I
Yeah.
was thinking you would keep it in commercial.
Okay.
You address it like for new stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then the stewardship's more about taking care of
What's
what you already
existing.
have.
Yeah.
And then
Or
maintain.
upgrading it, because it isn't just taking
Yeah.
care of it, it's really
Yeah.
the fact
Right,
that it's
right.
currently, you know, sort of
But
inadequate.
adding in all those other things that we need to take care of too, to Andrew's points, like you could.
Yeah.
That could be a collective
Okay, well,
category.
It's terrific to have a separate category,
Yeah, so it's just,
covers all the grades.
Yeah.
Mentions.
Yes, there are a lot of things here, you know, we're talking that not just stormwater and what stormwater is carrying, it's not just storage of stormwater. But, you know, going back to basic plants.
Yeah.
There's enforcement.
Mhm.
The town has been hiring temporary park rangers.
Yep.
But, you know, that program is not widespread. There's of course trails, maintenance of trails and parking areas and other access points. All these things.
Yep.
really don't have an organized program right now.
All that could
We'll
be
put
under
that-
that, and then you could even.
And maybe
address-
we'll change general to this stewardship.
Yeah,
And then, cause the vulnerability
and that's
assessment.
where you could
Yeah.
put things like. Pesticide
Yep.
management and things like that that are
Yeah,
just
that
in
we've
this
sort of talked
overall,
about, yep.
like, consider this
Yep.
too. But yeah, it's not necessarily about open space, but it's, before we can buy the open space, let's make sure it's still good. And then while we, once we have it, let's make sure it stays good, right?
Yeah.
And then if it's not good, let's fix it. So that's
Yeah.
that category that can do all this.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not just pesticides, it's also fertilizer.
Yeah,
use,
all
and then
the-
if there's- yeah.
And then would you move some of the educational pieces over? Yeah, because we talked about the MS4 reporting and all of that. Would you move that over to that section? And also, for those of us who are not engineers,
Explain what MS4 is.
no, not that. We know that. It seems like it would be useful to have some type of, maybe it's part of the MS4 report, but an assessment of new technology on a semi-annual basis or annual basis or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to say, hey, stormwater management changes over time. And we've got old properties that have probably ancient stormwater systems.
That was my point about it's the
Yeah.
same listing system.
Yeah,
basically,
yeah.
but-
But I think it's like, can you tell us what's new in the world of stormwater management?
Yeah.
On some type of basis. That's for the, I think for the council to understand.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, in Yarmouth, our town engineer does his little stormwater management thing every year. He's actually spectacularly good at it. He comes to the planning board and he does it for
He's the
the,
best.
he does it for the planning board and he does it for the council. And he does exactly that. Like, he goes through the requirements, but he also says, you know, here are all the new things that
Yeah.
that we could be adding, and you should think about these when you're reviewing planning board things. So yes, Steve is the best and he does and he really does a great job of it. I always crack up. I'm like, this is like the most boring thing in the world and you made it so fun.
That's just who he is.
I'd just like to note that a lot of the things we're discussing are sustainability issues.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the runoff from all different types of properties. Now, the
Yeah.
maintenance of trails. These are all sustainability issues for a town that is focused on having 30% by 2030.
Right. And I think we'll write a little paragraph for that stewardship section that says, you know, we understand that these are not about purchasing or owning open space, but all of these things impact on the quality of the land in the town. And so we want to support these activities, even though they might be under different.
Can I use your conference room?
No, I'm about to, but we're almost
We're
done.
ending.
I have an appointment. You know, you can use it. I'll just use my big office. I actually have to go meet a lady downstairs.
So do you think we should move education into into the stewardship, or should we keep education as its own category?
I think it is.
I agree, it's on
Okay.
category.
And any comments on the education goals? Or put in
I
there?
think there should be a goal under education that addresses, again, this idea of it plays into stewardship, but as we acquire properties, we should try to make them accessible to the school system.
Okay.
We're already looking at how do we design parking lots so we can have a bus turn
Yeah.
around in the parking lot?
Yeah.
How do we have restroom facilities that schools often require
Yeah.
for younger kids? I mean, it seems like we have to make sure that we can get that next generation out to these places.
Yep.
In whatever school programs are designed around that.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely. put that in
I
there.
agree with the particular stuff that you have in 411, but I would like to. And it's not really the scope here, so I think I'm getting into the same thing I'm doing next steps. We should provide incentives somehow. We try to figure out how to do it with commercial, we try to do the trade-offs to ensure that they can get what they need, and we're getting what we need. With developments with residential, how do we provide incentives for people to not use lawn fertilizer, for example. If they're, you know, in an area where we know it's, there's really no place in Scarborough where it's not running into the rivers anyway, except for, you know, northwest corner there where it runs into the Fore River. So, you know.
They have no problems in the Four Rivers, so we can just keep doing it.
No problem. But anyway, just something to think
Yeah.
about is.
I mean, the town could consider similar to the state's lake, what do they call that?
Like smart.
Lake smart, but you know, where people put their little thing on their
Yeah.
house. Like, you know, that's the best incentive for
Think about it.
for people is their neighbor knows they did a good thing, right?
I think this is all part of our
Yeah.
sustainability.
Or you could have your whole neighborhood, like if enough
Right.
homeowners do this, then we
Right.
can have, you know, a, you know,
Right. Our
conservation
neighborhood.
smart or, you know, kind of designation for the neighborhood.
So we'll just put something in incentive similar to the lake.
That's a
smart
good idea,
program.
because if you've seen that as being a real strategy, let's build it.
Yeah.
I have to go. This has been an excellent conversation. Thank you so much.
And thanks on.
Thanks.
And then the only, we skipped over data, that's the only one. Was there anything that we didn't include in? I tried to be very careful here because, you know, I could give you an 8-page data recommendations, but I tried to be nice.
Yeah, I think some of these. Like. As much as I like the action oriented, some of these might need to be like,
A little less,
yeah,
yeah.
I was, you know, these are sort of great asks, but is the resources to actually
Right.
do this is a
Exactly.
question. Yeah.
so like the collect more detailed habitat data, I mean, I would.
I didn't really mean to make that a, you must.
Yeah.
Just, again, as
Explore
backup, so that if you
opportunities
want
or-
to.
Yeah,
And you can get a grant to help do it, and it's in a plan, it's gonna make it easier, so,
right.
Could there be like every 5 years, go back and update the open space plan using whatever, or every X number of years?
That's a good
using new
idea, yeah.
habitat? And then how does that change your, you know, how does
Yeah.
that could then sort of, okay, we got change, priority areas have changed or.
Yeah.
Or,
and review existing
right,
data.
right.
Okay. Do that,
Another piece is, I mean, how much of data that's available, that's out there now, like the habitat stuff in the state, how much of that is available to us who are in committees in town?
All of it.
Well, yes and no,
Some of it is still
yes and no.
Well,
hidden, right?
Who-
yeah,
You know,
Yeah.
who knows
Different
how to
places.
access it, make it available, and, I mean, no, it's tough. I mean, it's great stuff, and I know that there's a lot of stuff out there.
well, and it's not necessarily updated regularly either, so, because Maine's a fairly big state and that's a small subset of the Department of Ag, Conservation and Forestry, so.
I am going to a meeting next week with Beginning with Habitat to talk about how they could do their mapping better. And how to make it more accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a series of 3 meetings, that they're having about that.
For example, we want to use the maps, we want to reference maps, you know, and referencing something online, you know, somebody to look at, it's a little difficult. We sit in committee, we explore over stuff, we have to look at these properties and see how they fit in, and see what sizes are.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm constantly switching between
Usability.
screens. I'm like, here's my parcel. What does that look like?
Yeah,
And then we don't
Well-
want to necessarily maintain the data because we won't know when it's updated, and so it will be out of date and.
so the town could create a viewer that uses the service that the state has, and then it's always up to date. And then you could have your parcels on it, and then, so that when committees are meeting, they know they have the most up-to-date data, and you know that you have the town's data, and it doesn't have to be public, it can be something that committees can log into. And then, you know, make that, I mean, we could put that as a potential recommendation.
Yeah, I was gonna
if
say,
the
can we
data
include
becomes-
that as a
Yeah,
recommendation?
Yeah.
That sounds like a great idea.
yeah,
This doesn't necessarily apply to the open space, but I just want to make sure that Parks and Conservation Land Board, the Conservation Commission and town staff know. The Scarborough Land Trust has a fund that gets renourished every year through a donor, about $6,000. That we use for exact research questions like this with college students. We have a relationship with UNE and USM, including their GIS program. And so there's a specific question that you want addressed, we could probably fit that into a student project. Have them, look at whatever.
Maybe
it is, you need
refining
a
some of
map to
this-
do This, or you need to have the data sets.
Yeah.
Maybe refining some of the data sets for Scarborough specific, in terms of habitat. and-
Even if it's,
Yeah.
and chunks, right, like,
Right.
somebody probably can't do the whole town in, one
Right.
summer of work, but you could start to identify areas, and maybe even starting with the focus areas,
Right.
but you could also then pick other parts of town to say, let's go get this particular type of data and get it mapped and get that. And then if we say we're gonna update every 5 years, then get that included in that information. The other thing I would say, I know I already said this once, but I was just at the Maine Outdoor Heritage. They did not give away they did not have enough applications to use all the money they had. Like, money just got left on the table. So I would highly recommend, and it's not really that hard, the application is not that hard, but it's good to have somebody who knows how they score things to help you with the application. But yeah, I was there, and of the 3 categories that they picked, only one of them they still funded every single thing. One thing got funded like $2,000 less because they ran out of money in that particular category, but the other 2 categories, which included land, did not have enough applications to give away all the money.
Maine Outdoor Heritage Fund.
Yeah,
We use that a lot.
Yeah.
Darcy, and I will say the acquisition pot usually gets used in some of the others.
and it didn't this time. That was the weird thing, was this, they said this was the first time that was the one that didn't get all, or one of the 2 that didn't get all the way used. So that one is usually more competitive. It wasn't this particular.
There is a law enforcement pot, basically.
Yeah.
There's an endangered species pot.
Yeah.
And I think there's another one too, I'm forgetting, but.
Yeah.
So it is good source, and they've been a reliable source for us for land acquisition projects.
Yeah, and as far as I can tell, it's the having lots of partners that gives you the money. That's how you get a high score.
Is it still the one though where you need to go and kind of like plead your case in front of the
Well,
viewers?
so I was there because I was getting one of the grants, and no, I
Okay.
didn't, because they were like, I'm just gonna vote that everybody who got above an 85, we give the money to. And they said, okay, and then they were
Because
done.
it used to be very like subjective, like you just basically went and,
Pitched, right?
Yeah.
pledged your case.
Now,
and
they
it's like
score them
horse
pretty-
trading almost.
Yeah, they seemed
and-
to, they said they'd been working hard on the scoring, and that so they're really kind of sticking to the
Oh, that's
scoring.
good. It's good to hear.
So, yeah, I drove up there and then I didn't know.
We-
And
we
then 2
typically-
seconds after I got there, it got approved. I was like, oh, well, it's coming.
And we typically do the meetings by Zoom or whatever. they
Yeah.
use, Teams or whatever. And we're just there to answer any specific questions on
Yeah.
our proposal. We don't really.
Yeah.
Present it, defend it.
Yeah, there was definitely no pleading, just people.
I feel like
Yeah.
15 years
I think
ago
that has
wasn't, that
definitely
wasn't quite the
changed. Yeah.
case, so that's good to hear.
Yeah.
that That's the process now.
Yeah. Anyway, just a thought. I mean, to continue with some of this stuff, because there is one about data.
So what was the purpose of the implementation plan sheets that came next? Because
Yeah, so,
those are taking the things from the recommendations.
yeah,
And is this a sample chart that? is
well,
supposed to help
our-
people
yeah.
understand, or is that? what-
our hope is to fill in the responsible party with the help of all of you, so that the plan is
Space
left.
plan,
Who will
you want
implement?
to fill those in? All of those in?
We want to fill in the responsible party part, so that when the plan is done and presented, that the people who are gonna be responsible for those particular actions know that that's gonna be their job. And then the complete part is for you to fill in later.
Well, and I'm wondering if there's kind of,
And we
if we
could
can
put
have
a-
like a short, near term, like
And we can add
immediate,
that too, yeah.
short term,
Yep.
midterm, long term.
Yep. Yep.
Add that in there.
We will.
So the
So-
expectation is we'd actually do all of the things that are in those recommendations. And that's just not realistic. We're not
Well,
Going to do all the things in those recommendations.
I
It's
think
not going to happen. So they're very good recommendations, and
Right.
I'm totally in support of everything up to this point.
Yeah.
But trying to lock this town into, and those of us who have to do the work.
Yeah.
Into doing all those things, just getting the council to even be able to focus on them.
Yeah.
And identify committees to do them Because yes, the person can be responsible, but they're not gonna be responsible for okaying another committee.
Yeah.
And admittedly, a lot of these things fall under existing committees, but they're already doing some of these things. They're also doing 50 other things.
Yeah.
So I do have concerns about filling in a table like this.
Yeah,
and-
so we can
and saying
write
this person's
something.
Responsible for
Yeah.
getting one of these things done when the council hasn't approved.
Yeah, so we can write something, because I think that's not really the intention, is that one, that they all have to get done, or two. We're not trying to, the intent is not to burden people. The intent is to know, like, again, we do have to have somebody who's overall, keeping track and checking in. And I think that the reason, at least when I've worked with this in other ways, to putting that responsible party and putting sort of a, short-term, medium-term, long-term, is really more so that when that conjunction of, funding, political will, and people to do the work comes together, that it's in there and you know who's responsible for it. So it's not, so I wouldn't say that it's that
Somebody
all of
has
these
to.
things have to get done. It's that you're checking in regularly about all the things and saying, does this seem like a likely thing to work on in the next year or 2 years or 3 years? And then if it's not, then that's fine. There's not gonna be there's no punitiveness to it of you didn't do this, and the council will also have impact on saying, okay, we're looking at these priorities and we wanna focus on 1.6 this year, right? Like, so it's more ability to be able to shift focus, because no matter what we were to say right now, like if we were to say, do this one, and this one, in 3 years, it'll be a different council and there'll be different priorities, and we don't wanna pre-arrange that those are the ones that have to get done. We've tried to list out as many as possible. And then I think what we wanna do is, as the political will exists, be able to move forward on them and be ready to move forward on them.
And I would say from a staff perspective, having an implementation schedule is very helpful, so that it helps kind of guide our priorities as well, and to make sure that we are hopefully meeting the goals laid out in the plan. I mean, like you said, hitting all of these is probably not realistic, but that's why we'll have, we're going through this process to help prioritize what are important. Those will be like either the highest priorities will be some near-term ones, or maybe some low-hanging fruit will be some near-term ones. There are others that are gonna take a little bit longer, and we'll add kind of the time frame in there, but.
Well, my only other comment too is that I'm not sure that I agree that those are the steps that have to be taken to conserve 50% by 2030.
But this is
They
not
are
just
steps.
talking about,
This is just,
Well, that's what it says.
oh,
Well, that's
first.
what that
This
was.
is the implementation plan for conserving 30%. That's an implementation plan for conserving open space.
Yeah.
And it should be, that's what it is. And I agree with it. I agree with that these are good things to do. But let's not confuse the council that,
Yeah, and the 30 by 30 is really a strategy. Yeah,
30%. That's not true.
We can change that category to not say conserve 30 by 30, instead it be like conserve land and talk about other places in the plan, like this is so that you can reach the goal of conserving 30% by 2030. Instead of having it like as the
and you
category.
can make it a strategy. Like, I think 30 by 30 is a strategy of focusing your energy on something right now, right? On adding some open space right now, but it's not, again, like you said, it's not the be all and end all of adding conservation land. And you don't want people to mistake the fact that when you get to 30, you can stop.
I don't want to
right?
end at 30%.
Right.
That's the case, because,
Yeah.
we actually should conserve more than that.
Yeah.
That was just a very good way for our council to do something very, very important, which
Right.
is to move us in this direction.
So I think we can make it a strategy and talk about it that way. And then call this overall topic just conservation of land.
Great, so we are 15 minutes over time, and I think we need to get kicked out of this room. So, I will say, just remind everyone that you have until December 6th to continue going through this and providing your comments and feedback. So this isn't your only opportunity. I think the discussion was really helpful. And I will follow up today with an email with kind of information that you can share with your representative committees. And I'll put out a couple potential dates for, our next meeting in January. Looking at after the 17th, when public comments are due, so I can chat with you guys to see how much time you're gonna want.
Yeah.
For
Would
that.
it be helpful or distracting if I could go in and make some of the comments that we talked about today and that's document that people who like weren't here can see?
That would be
That'd be
useful.
great.
That would be
Okay.
very useful.
Yeah.
If you have time.
Yeah, I would say if you wanna give me. All right, so why don't we do it this way? Once you're good with incorporating some of the information, then I'll send out the link to the larger
Great.
group, so you'll know
There
that
you go.
it's ready for you to review and to share with others. So-
That way we don't get the same, like they'll see
same
the,
comments.
the same comments,
Yeah.
they'll see that we were
Yeah.
addressing some of those things or
Yeah.
issues that might be raised with that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I'll chat with you
Yeah.
guys afterwards about,
Yeah.
and Doug, I don't know if you wanna stay, so we're gonna talk about, having a separate meeting to go through the scorecard so that it can align better with, what PCLB is currently using. All right, thanks, everyone. We'll follow up with another meeting date. And then stop the Zoom. And then that's-
This is a really great meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. It's really
Thank
helpful.
you all.
Thanks, Christopher.
Spurring us on to doing all your.